You're listening to Trax FM's podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, more podcasts are available on the RTM Click app and website. Let us know what you think. Please email us at traxfm.rtm@gmail.com. Like and follow us on social media at Trax FM Official.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to Trax FM. You're currently hanging out with me. My name is KG, and of course, as you know, every Wednesdays at about 11:15, we do have What Matters coming your way, and of course, in the week that is after the budget, we always have talks about budgets and the 2024 budget, of course. And today we're talking about Budget 2024. Once again, Consumers Headwind with our esteemed guest, Dato Indrani Thuraisingham, Vice President of the Federation of Malaysia's Consumers Association, otherwise also known as FOMCA, coming to you live from Angkasa. Hello, good morning, Dato. How are you today?
I'm good, KJ. Good morning.
All right, so it's an absolute pleasure having you here in the studio today. Now, we shall start with the questions because I believe that it's quite heavy for today. Now, consumer groups are full of praise for the 2024 budget due to its comprehensiveness as well as ambitious scope. How would Malaysia's 2024 budget impact the cost of living for consumers?
Yeah, I think if we see the budget of 2024, one of the priorities for the budget is actually raising the rakyat's standard of living. I think that's one of the priority of the unity government. And this would actually mean issues like housing, transport, food, healthcare, and so on, as well as income, some sort of income for them to sustain themselves. And I think the budget has kind of covered all these core areas for the ordinary consumers. When you talk about housing, they're talking about, reviving abandoned projects or delayed projects of housing. Many consumers, where FOMCA, we have received complaints, houses up to 20 years have been abandoned and where consumers still continue to pay for the loan, and this is sometimes unfair. And when we talk about transport, we have, now the allocation also for building more LRT so that, more consumers can actually use the public transport. When we talk about food, there's also allocation of now subsidies to ensure there's food security. There's more food being grown within the country rather than importing food. And then, of course, when you talk about healthcare, healthcare, I think, has got the biggest budget in terms of preventing overcrowding at public hospitals. So I think if we look at all this, and then, of course, plus, as I said, income, when we look at the additional cash transfers through the Rahmah program that the government has increased its allocation, and then also giving the civil servants 2,000 ringgit, while reviewing their wages. I think these are all positive overall for the consumers if we were to look at the budget in a holistic way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it touches a lot of sectors as well as sections, and I think a lot of people are happy about it as well. One thing that's happened is also that the sugar tax has been increased from 40 cent per litre to 50 cent per litre. What do you think about this? Is this a good thing, a bad thing, a great thing?
Yes, I think we, from the consumer movement, we welcome this move. I think it's very important that it's in the right direction, because if we will look at statistics in terms of healthcare, we are a nation, I think, which has got the highest numbers within the ASEAN region in terms of NCDs, and this is non-communicable diseases, which like, for example, heart attack, diabetes, and so on. And these comes because of our unhealthy lifestyle and diets. So when you talk about sugar, I think it falls within that category. I think within ASEAN, we are the fattiest nation in that sense. So I think we shouldn't be proud of that statistic, So I think from the consumer perspective, we welcome that. I think it's in the right direction. Because now you're trying to reduce sugar within, the beverages and, any other malt drinks or chocolate drinks and so on. But I think in addition to what the government has done under the healthcare, this comes under the healthcare, I would also want to see that there's some sort of promotional activities. I think that was not mentioned, but I hope that there's some allocation where they said, some of the duties that, this 10 cents increase would go towards towards, providing dialysis for those patients with diabetes. But I think what we need to also do to prevent this overcrowding of public hospitals, because why? Everybody is falling ill. We are becoming a sick nation. And I think one way of addressing that is to reduce NCDs. And so we need to now educate consumers. What is a healthy lifestyle? Yeah, so I think there has to be some sort of allocation in raising awareness and educating consumers at the grassroots level. Because if you're still talking about people in the remote areas, people want to have their air bandung with the condensed milk, our teh tarik, So I think, yes, once in a while, but we need to see how we can, ensure that in the long term that we have a sustainable diet and a healthy lifestyle.
Absolutely. I think you've hit it right on the head right there. I mean, although there is that increase, it also allows for the fact that we can be healthier as time goes on, because we will definitely reduce once the prices do go up for anything that is involved with the sugar tax. Now, of course, from a consumer standpoint, what do you say for the reduction of subsidies on budget 2024 that can what do you say for the reduced subsidies on budget 2024 that can really benefit Malaysians?
Okay, if we look at the subsidies allocation, if we compare to 2023's allocation for subsidies, which was, I think, about 64 billion, the 2023 budget actually allocated, we have actually now increased it to 81 billion, technically. And why is this happening is because, of course, we are looking at the world commodity prices. They have gone up, when we talk about globally. And that's why also our food import bill keeps going up as well. But I think we are now, if we look at the unity government's, proposed budget for next year, we are trying to slowly move away from this whole subsidy-based system. I think the Prime Minister said that we are the third highest in terms of petrol subsidies. For a nation of, 33 to 34 million population, we are one of the top, compared to those populations which are much higher. And, so I think it's a very disconnected, kind of a thing. And so I think we need to move away from that. And we need to ensure that we don't just give a blanket subsidy. And I think that is where there's this leakage and wastage of the government allocation for subsidies. We need to give, to the targeted communities that really need these subsidies, the poorer households. And I think that's a good move. And if you look at some of the allocations that have been specifically targeted for the B40 or the very hardcore poor, when you talk about electricity, when you talk about water, when you talk about housing and so on, the government has targeted the subsidies. So I think in the long term, we may see as we transition into this moving away from the subsidy-based system, there could be a little bit of pressure in the economy, but I think it will kind of stabilize. And I think the government has tried to put in certain mechanisms in place, like this cash transfer, they have increased the cash transfer. So I think they are also trying to ensure that there's not much of a pressure on the consumers or on the rakyat when this transition happened. And I think this is in the long term, it's a good move because it is actually draining the government's coffers to actually go towards development rather than just giving these subsidies, because it's not the ones who really need are taking it. I think the Prime Minister mentioned that, foreign workers and also then the higher rich strata of people who are benefiting that. When you talk about electricity, it's 10% of the consumers in this country enjoying 50% of subsidies on electricity, So that's really a drain on the government's coffers as well. And in terms of taxes, we are the lowest in ASEAN as well. We are not even imposing so much. The government is not imposing so much compared to the other countries.
That's true.
So I think whatever that the government can benefit, it can go towards development and making the rakyat's life much better.
Yes, and as you said, it's a long-term process, right? It's not something that can be done overnight.
Yes,
absolutely. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do is we're going to be taking a very short break. We are currently with Dato Indrani Thuraisingham, the Vice President of FOMCA, and we're talking about Consumers Headwind Budget 2024. We'll be right back after this song. All right, we are back, and we are back on What Matters, Budget 2024, Consumers Headwind, with our guest, Dato Indrani Thuraisingham, Vice President, Federation of Malaysia Consumers Association, otherwise also known as FOMCA. Right, Dato, can you tell, like you mentioned earlier, the current tax rate in Malaysia is indeed lower than neighbouring countries, And the government is in its measure to broaden the revenue from tax collection. Also announced an increase of sales tax to 8% from the current 6%. How would this impact the consumers, and what are the strategies to maintain the rate of service tax for food and beverage and telecommunication services as regarded as prudent as these are consumed by the masses?
Yeah, I think when we look at the tax rate to 8%, of course, the government has tried to exempt food and beverages and telecommunication. And I think these would account to at least about 50 to 60% of a household budget.
Yes.
So I think in that sense, that's good. I think what is more important is the stringent enforcement that has to happen from the government side, from the, the enforcement divisions of the various ministries that is looking into this areas. That when you talk about agriculture, when you're talking about food, you're talking about agriculture, you're talking about domestic trade, on food items and so on. Water, electricity, you've got the Energy Commission. So all these different enforcement agencies really have to work well. So if that works well, I think the benefits will be felt by the ordinary consumers. And the other thing that I would say is that, I'm sure many of them are going to be feeling that, oh yes, it's only food, beverage, and the telecommunication. But what about logistics? Because I think it's been clearly said that the logistics sector, the industry, would be imposed with this 8%, SST. Again, but the government has also given a diesel subsidy for the logistic companies. So I think it's like, taking one side but giving you on the other other side.
They're trying to maintain equilibrium.
Yes, So I think in that sense, I think the government is trying to ensure that, that the prices don't go up because, how do you move goods and services, especially on goods? If logistic companies keep saying, now we are going to be imposed with 8%, so we're going to put it down to the consumers, but you're getting diesel subsidy. So then you should kind of maintain the price. So, but how do we maintain? It's basically through stringent enforcement. I think the government also, the Ministry of Finance has recently and also just recently announced after the budget that there's going to be a budget monitoring committee under the Ministry of Finance.
Okay.
So again, I think usually Ministry of Finance, this budget committee, they kind of give annual reports. But I think here what needs to happen is that there should be much more regular reports, perhaps maybe every quarterly. There should be, some sort of report to show, okay, what are the inputs, what are the initiatives that have been taken, what has been the output, and what has been the outcome. Has there been any impact? I think we have not seen that, how the budget translate into actual impact for the consumers. So I think the budget monitoring committee really has to play a very active role. And we have to ensure that this committee is not just, by name, but, it has to be a proper working committee that has to look into that.
Yeah, and I do completely agree with you. I think having a tangible measuring metric should be one of the ways of being able to see, is it working?
Correct.
And what's our ROI from that as well, right? And of course, there is a 2,400 ringgit rebates to encourage the use of electric motorcycles. These are targeted at Malaysians with an annual income of 120,000 ringgit and below. What measures are there in place to support consumer spending and economic growth?
Yeah, I think if, you want to encourage the use of EV, the electric vehicles, because our petrol is so cheap in this country, as I said, we are the third highest, highest in terms of giving subsidies. So the government has yet to come up with any mechanism for petrol subsidies. They have only done for diesel, but they have not said anything about how to rationalize the petrol subsidies. So as long as, the petrol subsidies are still in place, there's no incentive for any of the consumers to go into EV, because petrol is still cheap.
Yeah.
So, but I think in the long term, again, as the government tends to maybe look into even rationalizing the petrol subsidies, there's going to be that push towards going towards EV. And I think now people are beginning to understand about issues like climate change, how pollution happens and what is the impact of pollution education, on our health, on the surrounding environment, and so on. So I think in that sense, there has to be more awareness activities, more educational activities, targeting schools, especially school children, universities, also then the working public, because we tend to always look for convenience.
Yeah.
And I think we need to be aware that we need to leave a healthy planet behind for our next generation, And so I think that kind of awareness and education programs have to be implemented. And I think that's the way forward to encourage more and more people to take up this offer of EV motorcycles, this incentive and so on. But there has to be that kind of awareness and education programs in place.
And of course, the infrastructure also needs to be
definitely,
able to
yes. And you
support
talk about charging stations and so on. So what's the use of you getting your EV and then you've got no place to charge?
Like if you're in a condo, where do you charge, right?
Correct, yeah. So the infrastructure has to be in place as well.
But I guess, as you said, there's a lot of, just like from earlier, there's a lot of motions within this particular budget that is long-term, very long-term.
Yes.
Right. And before we take another break, another question that though, 2.47 billion ringgit has been allocated for People's Housing Project. How does the 2024 budget address affordable housing and its impact on consumers?
Yes, I think that's, again, as I said, it's a very good thing that, that government has targeted housing because, especially for those who are in the lower rung of the economy. And I think the government is quite concerned about abandoned, delayed projects. Yeah. There's a special grant, I think, that's been given, I think 1 billion out of these two. In addition to this 2.47 billion, that there's a 1 billion special fund to give it to the some developers who are willing to take up some of these abandoned projects. Again, here, as I said, we are very optimistic about that. But again, there has to be certain mechanisms. So we have not seen what are the mechanisms that's going to be put in place. But again, who is going to select the developers?
Yes.
Yeah, we hope that, it's all done based on merit, that there must be some sort of a track record. So I would suggest that the Ministry of Finance, again, under some sort of a committee, sets up a task force and actually monitors and selects, developers who are based on merit and their track record. And also then what kind of projects are we going to choose? When you say delayed and abandoned, there are so many numbers of housing projects that have been, abandoned. So hopefully, again, that there would be some sort of selection that maybe houses which are near completion should be then taken up first, because then, it's just you use lesser funds to complete that project rather than going something which is totally right from the start, So I think then you can see an impact. If it's already 3/4 done, you just have to spend a little bit more to finish it off. And then those people can actually have access to housing. So I think the details are the ones that we need to be looking at. So overall, it's really very good, very positive, because as I said, FOMCA, we have received through our National Consumer Complaints Center, many complaints about abandoned projects, and where they have to continue paying their loans, servicing their loans. So this is something that I would say that consumers would be welcoming from the government.
Absolutely. Okay, Dato, what we're going to do is we're going to be taking another very short break. We are currently talking about Budget 2024 Consumers Headwind, and our guest, Dato Indrani Thuraisingham, is the Vice President of the Federation of Malaysian Consumers Association. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Budget 2024. Consumers Headwind is the topic today on What Matters with our guest, Dato Indrani Thuraisingham with FOMCA. Alright, so Dato, 10 billion ringgit was for Ramah Cash Aid programs that will benefit 60% of Malaysian has been announced. How will it impact the price on goods? What are your comments on this?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the cash aid, there's always this discussion that, when you give cash aid, the products might either go up or go down, because you look at economics. But I think the cash aid is where it helps the consumers not only to buy food, but also to pay for so many other, essential, items, such as, or even when you talk about services, rental of their, housing, so you're talking about rent, rent, you're talking about education, paying for school fees, or perhaps maybe even paying for school transport, and then also talking about healthcare. Of course, the government has provided, I think, about 700, that's what they're planning to provide, 700,000 individuals will have free healthcare at the private clinics. But what about the others? I mean, we've got much more hardcore poor, so again, people will have to pay for healthcare, buying medicines and things like that, essential medicines. So it's not only as in food that, the cost of food will go up or go down, but I think there's so many other items. So the cash transfer is actually just one way of just elevating whatever difficulties that a consumer has, because there's so many other things that you'll have to pay for. So I think that would kind of even out, whatever distortion in the market that, that would be there. So at the end, it's a good thing. Since I think COVID-19, the government has tried to give out a lot of cash aid transfers, and I think that's one of the best ways. Even the World Bank has said, that's a direct transfer to the consumer is the best way of them actually getting some sort of a benefit. How long this would go on, we'll have to see until, I think, globally, when everything kind of stabilizes. I mean, we are now living in a world which, you have climate, insecurity, you have political insecurity at the global levels. So, and then you have war and so on, where, food is affected, everything else is affected, access to fuel is affected. So I think at this moment, cash transfers is the best way to ensure that prices are kept at an affordable price for the general rakyat.
All right. Dato, we're actually running very short on time. So very, very quickly, how does FOMCA anticipate the private sector to measure a sustainable price of goods?
I mean, again, the private sector, they provide all aspects of the basic necessities. When you talk about water, electricity, it's either the GLCs or the GLICs who are providing that, housing, healthcare. Again, you have the government and the private sector. So I think this is where the government has encouraged the private sector through the tax relief for the private sector. Like, for example, under ESG, looking at environment, social and governance, if the private sector gives much more through CSR and all that for the social, for the communities who are poor, then they get certain tax rebates and so on. So I think in the long run, and also to support the SMEs, I think the small, micro and medium businesses, that's another way where they're getting some sort of tax exemption. So I think the private sector has got a role to play. So it has to be a multi-stakeholder. It has to be the people, it has to be the government, it has to be the private sector, working hand in hand to ensure that we continue to grow economically as a country, as well as then the rakyat also then has, our well-being is also then taken care of, at that national level.
Absolutely. And our final question for today, what is FOMCA's concerns resulting from the overall budget of 2024? And is there anything else that you'd like to add to that? Yeah,
I think overall we are, I would say, cautiously optimistic, when we look at the budget, because the wordings are all very nice. I think the details is where we are now looking forward from the government on how it's going to be implemented, what kind of mechanisms are going to be there. And also in terms of, as I said, this budget monitoring committee that the Ministry of Finance is planning to, set up. From the wordings, it looks like as if it's some sort of an internal, committee. But we hope that there would be external parties, like, for example, from the consumer movement, from the trade union, from FMM. There has to be people from outside the government, I think should be sitting in that budget committee so that it looks at it holistically, and then to ensure that, again, that the impact is felt, because sometimes we see projects being mentioned, but then at the end of 1 year, they said, oh, this project was not implemented, the funds were not utilized, and that's not what we want. If we look at the budget, it's really good, but the devil is where the implementation is. And I think that's where we have to ensure that this budget monitoring committee ensures full implementation of the budget, and definitely then the well-being of the rakyat would be ensured.
All right. Very, very well said, Dato. And of course, a big thank you to you for taking the time to come and to share with us the perspective of as the Vice President of the Federation of Malaysian Consumers Association, FOMCA. Absolutely wonderful to talk to you today. And we hope to have you again in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Dato Indrani Thuraisingham, and she's the Vice President of the Federation of Malaysian Consumers Association, FOMCA. They are very, very instrumental in making sure consumers get their rights handled. All right. So, right now, though, it's time for more music to come your way. I'll be back soon.
You're listening to Trax FM's podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, more podcasts are available on the RTM Click app and website. Let us know what you think. Please email us at traxfm.rtm@gmail.com. Like and follow us on social media at Trax FM Official.